Okay, so the first thing I generally do when setting up a new course, it sort of comes like this. I've already imported from one of my sandbox courses some extra stuff down here that I'm going to move around. I like to use these dividers. So typically I just click on that a couple of times and it puts them down here for me. And then I can move these links around a little bit to separate relevant information into these smaller categories to make things easier for students to navigate. So I'll put things like the content and the modules and discussions together. If you're not familiar with how to open and close some of these things, this information button I'm not going to use, so I'm just going to hide that from students. And so when you see that little square with a line drawn through it, that means that it's hidden from students. They can't see it. And you can easily change that by just hovering over and illuminating that little, triangle thing. And it gives you a couple options. You can rename it, you can show it, you can delete it. I tend not to delete stuff in Blackboard. I prefer to just move it and make it invisible, and then I just kind of toss everything down here. I just sort of prefer to do that. Many times I'll have down here modules that I'm working on, things I need to move or want to move, or things I might not be using right away, things I'm working on, that kind of thing. And again, all of those are hidden from students. Another thing I like to include in my discussions, I always have this open forum where students can ask a question. I tell them this is like raising a hand in class. So I find it helpful to put a course link right here in the main menu. And to do that, you can link anything in the course at all into this main menu, something that you really want students to have very quick access to. So you browse for that location, much like uploading a file, and then just keep scrolling down. And there are my discussions. This is everything, all my files and folders. And you just click on that, make it available to users, and hit submit. And then it always shows up down here. I just like to move it. And then I let my students know that this is available anytime they want to ask a question, a general kind of, a due date sort of question or something like that. For this class, especially because our students aren't as familiar with the campus, and especially now that they won't be on campus, I also like to put a link for the Begley Library in this main page. So to add a web link, you just give it a title and then go to the home page or whatever link you want to put and copy that right into there, make it available. For some reason, you have to go to the beginning and then it'll let you submit it. So I had to just put my cursor back before the H on the HT. Submit. And again, it shows up down here. I like to add it up here. So students have access to that easily. Again, for this class, because students aren't as familiar, I like to include their resources that are available on the SUNY Schenectady page. It's in this K through 12 initiatives, but again, just to make it really easy for them, I add that web link. I just call it student resources. And get back to the beginning, make it available. And move it up to there. I'm going to be using Blackboard Collaborative to meet with students, to have office hours. So I also typically, well, for this semester, I should say, I'm going to include that and this is way down. Blackboard Help, Blackboard Collaborative. Get available, submit. I want to make that its own little area, so I'll need another divider. And then move that up to here. It just takes a little bit of time to get familiar with moving these around. Okay, and then I just move down the list. I don't use this content. I keep my information in the modules and the discussion, and so I just block that from students, and then I put it down in this little repository area. Same for groups for now. I won't be using that. So when you switch to the student preview, all of this will not be there. So I find it handy to just sort of run through the student preview a couple of times and see what actually the students are going to see. I do want to add the blog that the students will need to do. This is something that I set up already. So again, I just have to go look for it. Blogs, there we go. My students will have to submit their paper to the blog so that other students can read it. So this is kind of the content area, what they need to do. Read through the modules, participate in the discussions, and do this blog current event paper. Moving back up here to my syllabus area, this is where I would upload my syllabus. So you go into the edit mode for that. I need to select a different, where's my computer? Okay. Just give it a label. And submit. I really like to also include a schedule for students. I make a separate file with just the schedule and tell them to print it, remind them to print it, ask them to print it, sometimes provide a printed copy, and tell them to put it on their wall. Print this schedule is typically how I label it. Just so they can keep up with, especially in a summer class. Things move so quickly. It's really easy to fall behind. I just like them to, they don't even have to turn on their computer. They can just look right up at their schedule. It's always available. In here, I have put a little PowerPoint presentation about myself. This is what I would usually do on the first day of class. I use this Snagit program to make a video here. That's definitely not necessary, but however you choose to introduce yourself to students, there are a couple ways to do that, and so I would put that in there. Okay, so now that this is relatively set up, I still may make a few changes, move a few things around. Again, it's really easy to do just by dragging that. Always make sure you're in this edit mode. I always forget that. So for the grade book, I'm going to start with my discussions. Their first discussion is an icebreaker discussion. So to put that into the grade book. And this is really the case with any assignment. You just go into the edit mode for that assignment, make sure it's available, set your date and time restrictions. So this needs to be done in the first week of class. So it's due on Sunday at midnight. And then this is where, once you start selecting things here, this is just a quick icebreaker, so it's only worth 5 points. Here, when you put this in the grade, the due date, in this section, not when it closes, the day that it's due, that will automatically put this into the grade book for you. You can select this, show participants in need grading status after every how many posts. You'll see this little exclamation point show up in the grade book. I like to do it for summer after every 1 post. I do a lot of grading because it's only a week, but you can set that for whatever you want. If they're doing a ton of posts and you don't want to know about it until they get 5 or whatever, that's up to you. I always like to allow them to subscribe to Threads. That way if they want to, they can get an email when someone posts. That just gives them that option. You really generally almost always need to allow members to create new threads. If you don't check this button, then they can't post to the board. I prefer not to use quotes and file attachments. Again, that's entirely based on your own preference. You hit submit, and then this brings you back to the discussion. This is where you can move around some of these things a little bit. These 2 are frozen, but I don't really need to see their username, their student ID. I like to be able to see their last access, when they last logged in. And then you can start to move these around a little bit. So because the icebreaker is their first, the first thing they have to do, and again, sometimes these are tricky to move around. There we go. This is not something they need to do. And then as I add assignments, it'll show up here, and then you can also move them around. For the first discussion, I go to edit. This is the first discussion that is also due within the first week. I need to change this date. Some of these imported from last year. So that's also due on the 5th. There's grading. To set the grades for that. And then if you go back in and move that so that it's in order.